Hi, I am Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. And tonight's message is entitled, Are you bowing down to Pharaoh, the narcissist, or is he bowing down to you? Once again, tonight's message is entitled, Are you bowing down to Pharaoh, the narcissist, or is he bowing down to you? And we always do what? We wear ties so we can make an impact. That means we're analyzing, troubleshooting, implementing, empowering, and impacting the women in our homes and then in our communities, and then what? All around the world. And one of the ways that we do that is that we share information, right? That's going to help them to walk in biblical healing, right? And walk in wholeness, right? And then to own their stories so they can own their healing and own their stories so that they can in turn own their feelings, right? So we're wearing a tie and we're making an impact. So if you can hit the like button, if you can share with a friend, coworker, family member, etc. And so without further ado, we're going to get right into the message, right? So with worship, that is what it is that gets God's attention, right? And then when it comes to worship, it is the highest form of praise and adoration and love in general that we can give God. And so when we worship God, we're not only giving him love, right? We're giving him honor, we're giving him glory, we're recognizing his omniscience, his omnipresence, his omnipotence, and his sovereignty, right? Unknowingly, when we enter relationships with narcissistic individuals, we are taking what belongs to God and we are giving that to man, right? So, take for instance, when you met up with the narcissistic individual, first you were worshiped, right? And this left you feeling off balance and like you were under a spell, which you were. It also gave you a sense of euphoria at the same time. And then you kind of felt like you were drunk, right? But it wasn't drunk with the Holy Spirit, that's for sure, right? And the spirit that you were filled with was a love bombing spirit, right? But it produced the same behavior as if you were physically drunk, okay? You became free hearted. You exhibited uncharacteristic behavior for the type of person that you are. Your judgment was off. And then you had a hangover that didn't even last until the next morning, but it lasted all the way till you got to the devaluation phase. And everybody's love bombing, the time period for that lasting, it varies, right? And if you're a transitional supply, right? If you're serving as transitional supply, that means that your love bombing was it was real quick. It probably was a meal, an expensive meal, and that was probably the gist of it, right? Expensive meal, and you got trauma bonded and soul tied in no time. And then you moved on to devaluation. So with transitional supply, remember those individuals are serving as supply for the narcissist to help them to get over a major life transition. And that is it. Okay. It's like that Amnon and Tamar situation where he walked around obsessed with being with his half sister. And so his transition was just to help him to get over that obsession. That it was just that sick is what his transition was, right? And so what happens is once you enter that devaluation phase, right? And that idealization phase is over, which is when the love bombing exists, right? It leaves you embarrassed. Think about it like a person that have a hangover. When you got a hangover from the love bombing phase, you're left embarrassed, you feel humiliated, and then you think like, man, I can't even believe I did that. Like I can't believe I like just went crazy buying him stuff. It's like a person who's drunk and buys a lot of persons. You're in the bar, drinks on me. Everybody in the house can get drinks, right? Or you getting high and they go and buy, whatever, marijuana, whatever for everybody else, right? So when you drunk and you high, you just do things that you normally wouldn't do. Your judgment is off, like I said. So it's like you look back and you're like, man, I can't believe I got caught up in that. But you didn't realize like you were literally under a spell. You were drunk with the spirit of love bombing, right? And you were trauma bonded and soul tied to him all in one, right? And the trauma bond came in because he probably shared a couple of traumatic things, and then might have had a drama scene behind it. You saw some crocodile tears. He fell out on the floor, and you're thinking, oh, wow, I've never seen a man so open and vulnerable like this. And it's like, no, he's not open and vulnerable. What it is he's trying to get you in turn to feel obligated to share. You know, it's always that fog when you with a narcissistic individual. Remember, the fog is the fear, obligation, and guilt, right? And so you never, in your wildest dreams, one thing you never thought about though is that you would have to return the favor, because first he love bombs you, which is, like I said, love bombing is nothing but worship. And what it is when one individual worships another individual, but it's with the sole purpose of grooming them for abuse. Okay. So you don't know that you're going to have to return the favor, right? Once you get to the devaluation phase, the love bombing is what he does to you. But then by the time you're in devaluation phase, he's expecting you to return the favor. And you return the favor by being what? Simply just narcissistic supply. And remember, when you're narcissistic supply, it means you serve as an emotional regulator, right? So you picture this, you got a desktop computer. The outside of the computer is your body, what we can see as when we look at each other, right? The inside, think about the lining of the computer being your soul, right? Then you've got the motherboard. I want you to think of that as being your mind. And then you've got the computer processor, which we know that as the CPU, that's your wheel. And then you've got a heat sink fan combo on top of the computer processor. And think of that as your emotions, right? Because your soul is combined of, it consists of rather, the mind, the will, and the emotions, right? So that heat sink fan combo is helping, which is your emotions, is determining what your will is going to be like, right? Which is the CPU, okay? And so the power supply that's inside of your desktop computer, so to speak, right? That power supply is giving voltage to all those peripherals that's attached to it. So you've got the motherboard, you got the CPU, and the heatsink fan combo. You've got hard drives, you've got DVD drives, you've got all of this stuff hooked up to the power supply, right? And so what happens is that when you have all of this stuff hooked up to the power supply, then what ends up happening is that sometimes it gets overheated, right? It's too much as far as the power supply is expected to do way too much. And so in turn, what ends up happening is that it can overheat, right? Because the computer power supply is not meant to handle that much voltage. I didn't realize I was going to get warm in my sweater, my shawl here. So anyways, the computer power supply is not meant to handle that much voltage, right? And so when you think about it, as individuals, we're not meant to be the Holy Spirit or an emotional regulator for anyone. Think about that. We can barely keep our own selves together and regulate our own emotions. But then we talk about regulating somebody else's emotions. We were not created to do that, right? And so that's what ends up happening, is that after a while, just like a computer needs to be shut down and taking a break, we also need the same situation to happen. We need to kind of sit down and kind of like reboot, or actually like power down. But then as a codependent, when you're with a narcissistic partner, instead of powering down, you always tend to be in Energizer Bunny mode, like the commercial, they keep going and going. But even the Energizer Bunny mode, at a certain point, the batteries run out. And so that's when you end up dealing with situations where you got autoimmune diseases coming in and all of this type of thing, if that makes sense, right? So what I want you to do is think about the power supply again, the power supply that's inside the computer. It looks pretty much like I guess I would say a rectangular box, right? But like this. And it could be like maybe like this. So you got like the rectangular box, and then you got maybe like this in height, right? Okay. So on the back of that power supply, they have a switch on the back. So I want you to picture that, right? You, as the codependent partner to the narcissistic individual, have a switch on the back of you, right? So when the narcissist flicks your switch up, right, because you are the power supply for him, you're in the one-up position, which is the position for admiring him and worshiping him. That's the one up position, right? But then your other function as a power supply is the one down position. So when he flicks the switch back on the back of you for your power supply, the one down position means that you are devalued. So as soon as he gets some uncomfortable emotions, such as anger, rage, dealing with shame from somebody saying something to him or her, it could be, and he or she does not know how to deal with it and what to do, then it offloads over to you by saying something, by belittling you and taking all that self-hatred and self-loathing and offloading it onto you, if that makes sense. So hopefully that's a pretty much a pretty good like visual for how this works, right? And so what happens is that when you are in admiring mode, which slash worshiper mode, you are expected, if your narcissistic partner is somatic, and somatic means basically your body, right? So if your narcissistic partner is one that's all into their body, okay, then they'll be expecting, oh, baby, you look so good. Your hair looks so good. Did you just get a cut today? You just got a cut this week? Oh, your mustache looks so good. Oh, you've been working out. Oh, look at you. You know, you got your abs and your core look good and your body look good, and just going on and on and on. And don't get me wrong, as a wife or partner, etc., you want to be able to say things that's going to make your spouse and a partner feel good about him or herself, right? You want to give words of affirmation. This is not a normal situation as far as being expected to do that every day, all day long. Think about it. It's not that much looking good in the world as far as saying that all day, every day, like you a tape recorder, right? That gets worn out. But that's what you're expected to do. Then you have the narcissistic individuals who have flipped over on the other side of that coin. Remember, one side is the somatic, which is the body, but then you've got the other side of the coin, that's the cerebral. And the cerebral is like dealing with the brain. Those are the narcissistic individuals who are all about what they know and their knowledge, right? Their love of knowledge and what it is they know, and one upping you with that, right? And so the thing is, what happens is that, just say for instance, even if you have a cerebral vulnerable narcissist, what could end up happening is that they I'm trying to think of how do I want to put it. Okay, so with the cerebral vulnerable narcissist, they use their superiority of knowledge, right, along with their status, the status of vulnerability, I would say. Like, say for instance, if they're single, or they're dealing with trauma, some type of PTSD, or they're divorced, or even when you look at scripture, you think about King Ahab, right? He was a vulnerable narcissist. But cerebral vulnerable narcissists, you got that side of using their status and their need for entitlement, and like having this, how would I say, a victimhood mentality, right? So it's a victimhood mentality along with their love of knowledge, which is the cerebral side. Cerebral is the love of knowledge. But then if you combine a cerebral vulnerable narcissist who loves victimhood based upon their status, that's like a toxic cocktail right there, right? What can happen though with the cerebral side, and they, as far as you worshiping them, they want you to not worship them as far as their bodies, but it'd be basically like what they know. Somatic is with the body. You know, you look good and all of this look good in your body and all this. But with a cerebral narcissist, right? Even if it's self-righteous cerebral or cerebral vulnerable, with cerebral narcissists, they want you to affirm them and worship them all day long about what it is. You know, oh, baby, you know so much history. Oh, yeah, I know you know all about the Smithsonian museums and all about car repairs and how to fix air conditioners if they blow out, and everything about cars, and you know everything about computers, and you know all about finances and accounting, and you can answer any medical questions. But like I said, think about it though, every day, all day long, that gets played out with anybody. You want to affirm people, but not to that extent. And then because you've got, what happens is when it comes to narcissism, just picture a coin, right? Whether it's a penny, any coin, right? You got the heads and the tails. Like when you were kids, you say, okay, heads or tails, and then you try to see who's going to go first in playing it or whatever game, right? So picture that same coin. When you have overt and covert, it's a coin, but it's just two sides to that coin. So even if the person is a covert narcissist, every blue moon, they might do something that's overt behavior. If the person is a vulnerable narcissist and things are, let's see, the every blue moon when they're going well, right? Instead of going bad, they're going well. Then they might all of a sudden become grandiose for a little while until things go back to status quo, which is the norm, being they're not going so well, if that makes sense. And then it's the same thing with the cerebral and the somatic. Like I said, because the somatic is the body and the cerebral is the knowledge of, right, the brain of what they know. So sometimes they might flip to the other side of that coin. However, just like with the self-righteous cerebral narcissist or the cerebral vulnerable narcissist, they have those specific spirits in them because that's basically their operating system. But every blue moon, they might flip the coin. Hopefully I'm making sense, right? It's just two sides of the same coin. If you think about it, the heads or tails, depending on the situation, they might flip the coin sometimes, right? And so when it comes to like I said, with the somatic narcissist, they're so caught up in their body. And that's why what it is that they want everybody to end up just worshiping them and overly indulging in their body and their form. And they will even try to bring that somatic part into the bedroom, if that makes sense, right? And so think about it though. You entered this relationship and you did not realize that your job description was going to be a power supply, right? And then you didn't realize that you were going to be compared to his side chicks. And the side chicks are usually the co-workers who have been disarmed just like you. You see what I'm saying? They started off as co-workers, then moved on to friends, and then maybe even during lunch break or after work or whatever, they chit-chatted. Some things, some information was exchanged that shouldn't have been, and the next thing you know, they've gone from co-workers to side chicks, and they themselves are trying to figure out, how did I get caught up in this mess? But like I said, just like you, they were disarmed. So it's like he's got them and pitting them against you and pitting you against them. So everybody ends up being on like this hamster wheel of striving, so to speak, right? And so what happens is, if he doesn't feel like you're doing a good enough job as supply, what will happen is he will start to compare you to his coworkers, okay? And, think about it. Like if he's cerebral, where it's dealing with the brain and the knowledge, right? Well, I got all my coworkers, they call me for everything. They ask me their opinions about renovating their homes, painting their homes, and doing car repairs for them and repairing the air conditioner, and about which medical fields and schools they should get into, and which schools they should go to, and how to fight divorce in court, and how to handle their childhood wounds and abuse. And then you look, and and some of you kind of consider me as like their counselor or therapist. And you sitting there like, what in the world? So your coworkers, these supposed to be your coworkers, are calling you with all of this. And some of it, of course, we know is generals, and some of it you might think, okay, it's nothing wrong with it. Some of the stuff they'll tell you, all of a sudden you could tell it's not something, that's not something, something's not quite right, because your body will react. You have certain sensations in your body and in your gut and your instinct, and some is just like, Holy Spirit's like, something's wrong with this. Something's not right with this. Something is not right. You can't put your finger on it, but it's not good, right? And so basically the hidden message in that is you need to bump up your game. And sometimes he or she will actually tell you that you need to bump up your game, right? And so what happens is that what ends up happening is that your ex narcissistic partner or current, you could still be in this situation, right? He is taking his side chicks, like I said, he's pitting them against you and he's pitting you against them. And then all of a sudden, this is all like this big theater production, right? And so this whole situation just seems like it's like you on a TV show called Too Close for Comfort. I don't know if you guys, or some of you are old enough to remember that, but there was a show called Too Close for Comfort. So it's almost like he's put everybody on this show with him and starts doing things that's inappropriate with the coworkers. And you're sometimes in on these conversations and not feeling good about it, hearing them talk to them. And it's like, should they really be discussing this type of thing? And then you start wondering, do the co-workers' husbands, are they aware of the fact that this conversation is going on? It gets just that touchy and with the energy and whatnot, right? And so, like I said, it still keeps you in the point of like something doesn't feel right. But because of your own brokenness and childhood wounds and low self-esteem and low self-worth, you just go ahead and go along with it initially, right? So when you are in a place of worship with the narcissist, you're basically in Egypt. Okay, that's the long story short, short version of it. And then Egypt is representing slavery. Okay, your narcissistic partner is Pharaoh. And the first thing that happened when you bow down to Pharaoh is that you broke two of the first 10 commandments, right? And then that's in Exodus 21-4. I want to read that. I got to read exactly what it was that God said. So you broke the first, we broke the first two in a relationship when it came to being with a narcissistic individual. It says, then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have any other gods besides me. Okay, so that's commandment number one. The number two is do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters underneath the earth. Do not bow and worship to them, and do not serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the father's iniquity to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. So that's the first thing that happened, right? In this situation with a narcissistic partner, is that the first two commandments, the first 10 commandments, right off the back, it's like, okay. And they know the type of individual they're getting into the relationship with. So a lot of times they will kind of, they will kind of like feel you out, so to speak, and see where you're coming from. So if they know you're a Christian, they figure, oh, I got me a church girl. They're going to try to go as far as they can as far as pushing your boundaries. You see what I'm saying? They kind of sizing you up, so to speak, and like, okay, I see what angle. And they call it like taking snapshots. You know how you take your phone and you would do a screenshot? They kind of take snapshots in their brain of what angle they're going to come to you at and what they're going to use for the devaluation phase, right? And then also what they're going to use when they get ready to discard of you. Is sick and twisted, but that's usually what happens, okay? Number two, you enter the land of familiar spirits. The way you ended up getting hooked to him is through the familiar spirits of rejection, trauma, and abandonment. The seed of rejection plants love and approval addictions inside of your soul. And then that seed of abandonment planted comfort addictions inside of your soul, right? The comfort addictions didn't show up until you got to a state of languishing in that relationship with your narcissistic partner, right? You got into a state of languishing, pain, hurt, and disbelief that all of your striving to get your love and approval addictions needs met is not working. It's still not enough to convince your narcissistic partner to give you what you need. You're trying to get back to that first high, right? Because your partner, not only are you worshiping him or her, your partner has become a drug to you and you don't even know. The oxytocin that your brain is giving off is keeping you trauma bonded. And that oxytocin is the love hormone, right? And then you've got the dopamine that's going off in your brain from being trauma bonded. That's the addiction hormone, right? And so in 1 John 2:16, it says, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. So the love and approval addiction needs, right? Those meet the lust of the eyes. Because I just read that verse from 1 John 2:16, right? So your love and approval addiction, right? That's the lust of the eyes. It gives you a false sense of safety and security, right? So it's like I'm falling in love with what I'm seeing, and everybody else will too. He will make me enough, and I will gain approval through him, and everyone else right? Will be approving of him, right? And think about Eve in the Garden of Eden. Think about her, the lust of the eyes, right? That's when she saw the fruit on the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What did it say? It looked like it was good, right? It was aesthetically pleasing to her eyesight. That was one of them, right? And then the second thing it said is that it looked like it was good for food. That was another thing because it was three things that she saw. And so that goes along with the lust of the flesh. The comfort addiction is met through the lust of the flesh, right? And so remember when she said she thought the fruit looked good for food, that's lust of the flesh. And in your case, you looked at him, you took one look at him and you say, yeah, he's a good provider, right? He gonna bring in the bacon and everything else, right? False sense of safety and security and comfort. And then number 3 that was in that verse in 1 John 2:16, the pride of life needs will be met through knowledge addiction. And that's going to come out either the late stage of devaluation or the early discard phase or after your narcissistic partner has left you. Remember, the pride of life involves wisdom, having a lot of knowledge, and having power and influence, right? And just like Eve thought the fruit looked like it was one to make one wise, that's exactly what knowledge addiction does, right? It's like, oh, look at how much power and wealth and influence. Think about that. When you look at somebody that they know a lot, what do you start thinking about? Power and influence, right? That's the pride of life. And those are the 3 things that Satan tempts us with. It's the lust of the eyes, it's the lust of the flesh, and it's the pride of life, right? So the third thing that happened, right, when you got with this narcissistic guy is that you agreed to situationships. When the discard phase came along, your narcissistic partner let you in on a secret. And it really wasn't a secret, but it was a secret for a while for him because he knew about it. You just didn't know. All of a sudden, you see him clinging on to that phone more than usual. Well, normally he would just sit it there and just ignore it or whatever. You notice that he's holding on to it and it's almost like it's just glued to his pocket, right? Can't go to the bathroom without taking the phone, all that kind of behavior, right? So when the discard phase comes along, he lets you in on the secret. I'm thinking about leaving you. He's been cheating all along, right? But this happens in the discard phase, okay? And it's at this discard phase that you realize that his side chick has been pressuring him. She's been putting the pressure on him. She's ready to have the life that he's already told her that you and him have, okay? She's ready for that. So she's putting the pressure on him. She's ready for the happily ever after. But we all know there's no happily ever after with a narcissistic individual, right? And sometimes you have happily ever after with them is stealing, killing, destroying your soul. That don't sound like a happily ever after to me, right? And then sometimes the new supply, right? New supply slash side chick is also narcissistic. And even though both of those individuals will be narcissistic, it's basically a game of who has the most power and control, when and where and how, right? So sometimes he'll replace you as an empath with somebody who is just as narcissistic as he is. And it'd be more like an Ahab and Jezebel situation. No peace in that household. So what happens is he's going to begin doing things at this point so you can put him out. That is what he's hoping for. And you figure, why would he want me to put him out? He is telling you he's thinking about leaving, but he does not want to take the responsibility. He's still trying to keep up this image that he's got, right? The image he's got at work, the image he's got at church, on a deacon board, being the pastor, right? Being a choir member or whatever. So he needs you to be able to put him out, right? He needs to sabotage the situation so you can put him out so he can maintain his image. Not thinking that, okay, if I've been acting this loosely everywhere, I basically put my business out there anyway, right? But in his mind, if I can get her to put me out, I don't have to take responsibility for my actions. And then when people ask me what happened, I can say, well, you know, she was crazy. She was crazy. That's all it was. She was just crazy. And so what happens is that that's part of it, right? The other part of that, what gets in the way of any narcissistic individual following through with whatever it is that they told you they were going to do, is their avoidant attachment style. And there are two things that go along with avoidant attachment styles. Number one, they're not going to do what they said they were going to do. You're going to get all the way down to finally of them doing what they said they were going to do, and they won't do it. They will not do it. Or you'll get all the way down to the end, and instead of them doing what they promised they were going to do, they're going to give you something different. It's like the scripture verse where it says, who's going to ask for a fish and somebody going to give them a stone? That don't make any sense, does it? That's what they do. You see what I'm saying? Like, I know you want a sweater, so when it comes to Christmas time, I'm going to give you some gym shoes. That's part of the avoidant attachment style, okay? Not giving you what's promised or just not doing anything at all, right? They get right down to it, and it's like, I can't do it, okay? Whatever the case may be, they want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. And so in order to make this happen, they're going to try to negotiate situationships where the two of you are still staying together in the same household. And at the same time, he's entertaining the side chick, right? And so, like I said, staying in the same household, that's option number one. But then you flip the coin. Option number two is going to be what? That he will move out. You guys will have a separation period for a year, and then he'll decide what he's going to do. So you know what that means, right? Think about what I just said. He's already been cheating. So for option number two, he wants it so that he can, option number one is him staying in the house, you guys living there, but living separate lives for the sake of the children. Option number two is what? Him getting an apartment and moving, you guys go on separation, him getting an apartment and staying in an apartment for a year and seeing how things go. And you know what that means. That means that what he basically wants is, if it doesn't work out with the new supply / side chick, he can always come back to you. So he tries to get you to sign up as backup power supply, right? Just in case it doesn't work out. So he wants to, like I said, have his cake and eat it too, right? Just in case the new supply / side chick is not all of that in a bag of chips as he thought. He wants to kind of leave the door open to come back if it don't work out. And so initially you might find yourself signing up for that, right? Yeah, we can try that out of desperation. Yeah, we could try that out, right? And then all of a sudden the Holy Spirit almost like literally knocks you out. Have you lost your mind? You are a daughter of the King. Why would you set up an agreement like that, right? All of a sudden you didn't have a V8 on top of your head and like, I can't go with this. I cannot in good faith go along with this when I know in the back of my mind, this is probably what he's going to do. This is not going to be pleasing to God as his daughter, right? Child of God. I just can't do it, right? And so the situation starts to get a little bit dicier because you're just like, no, I can't do it. I've reneged. I can't go along with, this type of situationship style, right? So the situation gets a little bit dicier, and he starts to have all of these statements coming out of his mouth that you've never heard before. They literally leave your mouth wide open with the flies coming in because you're just like, who says this to somebody? It's one thing as adults, when we get a certain age, we know that everything that comes into our mind doesn't necessarily need to come out of our mouths, right? That's one thing. And so it's another thing as an older adult, and we're still doing that, right? So statement number one that he might say, I never should have got married in the first place. I've always thought of myself as just having girlfriends, and then you're sitting there like, oh, well, you could have kept that one to yourself. Then statement number two, well, this relationship is it. I'm not getting married again. I'm not going to be in a relationship with anybody else. And then you're thinking, okay, well, that's also a lie because you've had somebody else on the side, right? And then statement number three would possibly be in this card phase, well, we can still be friends. I love you, but I'm just not in love with you. And that translation is, I need you to stay back pocket power supply. In case it don't work out, I need you. If it don't work out with the side chick, I'm going to need you there. Plus, even if it does, I still need you in my back pocket because I want to pit you against her and her against you and the other side chicks that I got going on at work, right? I need you guys probably for like maybe scene 1, 2, and 3 out of act 1 for my theater production, right? That I've got going on in my head. It's just that sick. But like I said, these statements leave you with like, you don't know what to say. I mean, what do you say to something like that? You don't know, right? And so what happens is that once these statements come out, you start having come to Jesus statements of your own, right? And then it's like on this one movie I watched, and you guys have probably seen it. It's called The Preacher's Kid. You have one of the main characters. Her name is Angie, and she's in a relationship with this one guy named Devlin. And Devlin is a narcissist. Okay, he has taken her there and back. He's looked at her, sized her up, taken some snapshots, and knows what he's going to use to attack her. Right. His whole plan is to completely change around her character so she can be the reverse of the type of person she is, right? Before you know it, he had her dressing like she was a woman of the streets, literally, right? And they were like this traveling play. They went from city to city in the U.S. doing what's supposed to have been a church production play. And she's thinking everybody that's participating in the play is Christians. And she come to find out like over half of this crew, right? Probably a good 80% of them are not. They're professing to be Christians, but they're really not. She learns a lot on this journey, right? But he, like I said, he goes to an extreme. And it's towards the end of that relationship that Angie's like, she has this come to Jesus moment. She's just like, wow. And she's looking at him like, how did I ever get so off track? How did I get this far with you? And, and she tells him, he's looking at her like, oh, no, you're not, he mentioned to her, you're not having one of those moments again. So it tells you she had all of a sudden like start having these come to Jesus moments like, this is not where I should be. And she's like, how did I get so off track with you? Like, how did I allow this to happen? And then she said, every day my dad called me a daughter of the king, and she looked at him and still was like disgusted, kind of like, I just can't believe I let you do this to me, and degrade and devalue me, right? And she said, yeah, every day he called me a daughter of the king. And then now this, and then that's when she ended it with him. She had enough umph in her to end it, right? So you're going to have those moments where you all of a sudden are going to start realizing your value, and just like, even as painful as this is going to be, I cannot reside in this anymore, right? This is wrong. I've been worshiping you as if you were God. And you might even tell him this, right? I've been worshiping you as if you were God and trying to please so much to please you when I should have been worshiping God and trying to please him and figure out, what it is that he wants me to do for him, right? And of course, what's going to happen in order to deflect from his supply addiction needs of worship? Nah, you crazy. You crazy. You crazy. You crazy. Your sister crazy. Your auntie crazy. Your mama and grandma crazy. And you're thinking, well, where did this come from, right? Yeah, you have low self-esteem and low self-worth. You had that when I met you, and you overweight and your mom overweight. I mean, just will go down the line. But you see how his supply addiction needs kicked in. And because of the inability to sit in that for a very long time, offloading and deflecting and blame shifting onto you has to take place, right? In order for him to not have to deal with all of that self-hatred, right? And so he goes back to the information you gave him in the beginning when he love bombed and trauma bonded you and soul tied you. You telling him about your weight issues and how you had low self-esteem and issues with body image and self-worth. It all turns back around. And him starting, you lazy. That's the only reason why you want to get out of this relationship. So instead of him looking at what you said about the worship, him looking at that and knowing that that's wrong, that he ever expected you to do that, it in turn from you telling him the truth about, giving him worship that should not even be due to him or any other individual, to all of a sudden you're lazy, right? And so when you think about it, it's the same thing that happened in the scripture. And it also often happens in the workplace, right? When you end up in Egypt. And remember, Egypt represents a place of slavery, right? And it could be the entire company that's slavery, or it can be your department that you're working in. They won't give you everything you need to do your job and meet the day's quota. And in order to deflect from what the real issue is, they'll start telling you that you're not doing your job, you lazy, and they probably need to replace you. Then they'll gaslight you with words, right? More words of being lazy and not even taking care of everything on the job description list, right? and not cooperating with the rest of the staff. They would just start making up all kind of stuff. Or they would gaslight you with actions by just standing there and staring at you as if you're supposed to be working, but you've already told them that you don't have everything that you need to do your job. So that's gaslighting with actions, because it's acting like you need to be working, but knowing at the same time you don't have everything that you need to do your work. So they stand there and they put the pressure on you, right? And they've been talking about getting you equipment for months now. So it's like it's a play on words and it's a play on actions, but all of it is gaslighting. They're aware of exactly what the problem is. So I want to read in Exodus 5, verses 6 through 18, how that worked out with the Israelites and how Pharaoh played the same game, right? This is Exodus 5, and it's the 6th through the 18th verses. That day, Pharaoh commanded the overseers of the people as well as their foremen, don't continue to supply the people with straw for making bricks as before. They must go and gather straw for themselves, but require the same quota of bricks from them as they were making before. Do not reduce it. So this is a mess. He's telling them have the same requirement, but don't give them any straw in before, because first they were bringing them the straw. See what I'm saying? So that's going to be at a disadvantage. That's more time. For they are slackers. That's why they're crying out, let's go and sacrifice to our God. So you see what he did? He deflected and blame shift and gaslit there, saying that they were lazy and slacking. And that's why they wanted to go worship God. Not that like I'm holding people against their own will and they're slaves, but they're lazy. Impose heavier work on the men, then they will be occupied with it and not pay attention to deceptive words. You see what I'm saying? So he admitted what it was he was doing. And you know, that's real slick. And that's the same thing they do at these jobs. So the overseers and foremen of the people went out and said to them, this is what Pharaoh says. I'm not giving you straw. Go get straw yourself wherever you can find it. But there would be no reduction at all in your workload. So the people scattered throughout the land of Egypt to grab stubble for straw. The overseers insisted, finish your assigned work each day, just as you did when straw was provided. Then the Israelite foremen, whom Pharaoh's slave drivers had set over the people, were beaten and asked, why haven't you finished making your prescribed number of bricks yesterday or today as you did before? That's gaslighting. They knew that it was going to take too long to get all of that stuff together, right? But they were playing with their minds and making it seem like they were crazy and lazy. So the Israelite foremen went in and cried for help to Pharaoh. Why are you treating your servants this way? No straw has been given to your servants, yet they say to us, make bricks. Look, your servants are being beaten, but it's your own people who are at fault. Pharaoh knew that, but he said, you are slackers. Slackers. So he said it twice. That's why you're saying, let us go sacrifice to the Lord. So he's saying it again. Still gaslighting. This is unbelievable. Now get to work. No straw will be given to you, but you must produce the same quantity of bricks. The Israelite foremen saw that they were in trouble when they were told you cannot reduce your daily quota of bricks. When they left Pharaoh, they confronted Moses and Aaron, who stood waiting to meet them. So they were mad after that. They were piping mad because they figured, okay, you came over here saying that you were going to try to free us, except for the fact that we ended up with more work because of the fact now we got to go collect our own straw, right? The Lord did. We know the story of him eventually delivering them. But I'm saying this is what happens when you are bowing down to Pharaoh in a work environment, right? And that environment of slavery is Egypt, right? And so, like I said, he gaslit them. He called them lazy. He wanted to call them slackers, right? He gaslit them with actions by beating them, right? Telling them the work had to be done, make the bricks, knowing that they didn't have the resources to get all this done. And then he told his flying monkeys, don't get them any straw, right? And the other materials they need, right? And then had them try to figure it out on their own by beating them. What I want to remind you is that you are enough. You do not have to bow down to anyone to prove your loyalty and that you are, right? You can reclaim your power, soul, and identity today. And you can reclaim the power, soul, and identity of your calling. Okay? And remember, you wear a tie so you can make an impact. That means you're analyzing, troubleshooting, implementing, empowering, and impacting the women in their homes, the communities, and the world. Grab your keys to the kingdom. and get your inheritance. I love you, ladies. God bless you. Men, if there's any men out there listening, until next time. Again, I am Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. God bless.